these are appetizers, okay? They're not the full meal. But hopefully the appetizers will give you enough, to want to have the whole meal. So we'll just see. We'll do the best that we can. Now, what we do at Franciscan University is we took the work of Monsignor Francis Kelly. So Monsignor Francis Kelly, probably 40 years ago, worked for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and he developed this method of catechesis, and it's brilliant. And so the church says there's not one method of catechesis. There's lots of methods out there. The Sisters Filippini, the sisters have a method from their foundress. You're surprised that I knew that? So I knew that. So I'm big on methods. That's what I teach as well. So there's lots of methods, and they're usually effective as long as you bring people into union with Jesus Christ. You're good, okay? There's some methods out there that just share. Has anybody been the victim of that kind of catechesis? I just share how I feel, and you share how you feel, and we haven't really talked about anything, okay? So it's certainly not about Jesus. That was my whole high school experience. So I graduated from high school in 1973, which is very hard for me to get my brain around. But I went to a prestigious all-girls high school, and we didn't have religion anymore. We had values education, and it was an elective. So you didn't have to go if you didn't want to. And we shared, because I was a little religious nerd. And the only class that was of any benefit whatsoever, that was a good class, was a marriage prep course. There were 11 of us in there, 4 of us entered the convent. Oh, well. Okay, so at Franciscan University, I'm not saying that we have the gift of everything. We are a really good program, but this whole ecclesial method we didn't get on our own. We got it from Monsignor Kelly. So there is a book out there. It's called The Mystery We Proclaim. It's his book. He updated it after the Catechism was promulgated, The Mystery We Proclaim. And that'll unpack that for you, okay? So I'm sure it's on Amazon. What isn't on Amazon, right? So you can get it that way. But we've taken it and gone very, very much farther than anything he ever imagined. And he's retired. He lives in Rome. But he admits that. So I have those 2 words up there, kerygma and the kerygma. Have you heard kerygma before? Yes. So kerygma is that proclamation of the gospel. So in the new directory, kerygma is used quite a bit. Pope Francis uses it a lot. The church always has used it. So that's the initial proclamation of the gospel, but it's not one and done. Okay, because sometimes that's what people think. So kind of I accept Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior, and I'm done, right? I'm done. We're never done. Never gets finished, right? Until we meet Jesus face to face at the end of our lives. And so the kerygma has to be continuously proclaimed. So everything that we do when we teach is always kerygmatic. Does that make sense? So it's always, again, the proclamation. We tell them who Jesus is. So even if we have the best textbooks in the world, and there's some really good ones out there, we still have to have that proclamation of who Jesus is. The good news, the proclamation. The gospel means good news, right? So the kerygma. Now, a word that's not used very often, but I use it all the time, is kerygma. So the kerygma is the deliverer of the kerygma. Good? They're Greek words. So a good English translation for kerygma is herald, is the herald of the gospel. Now, I'm a Franciscan and honorary Salesian, but I'm a Franciscan first. And Francis of Assisi didn't just love the animals, okay? He loved Jesus, crib, cross, Eucharist. That's St. Francis of Assisi. The crib, the cross, the Eucharist. So Francis was in the woods one day, as he was wont to do, and he was beset by bandits. And they said, "Who are you?" Because he was probably picked up 2 sticks and was playing the violin, which he really did that stuff. And so they said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am the herald of the great king." So Francis was all caught up in the troubadour, like the chivalry, and he wanted to be a knight and all of those things. So the heralds of the king would go around the countryside proclaiming the news, right? There's no internet, there's no newspapers, so the herald would be sent out to say, hear ye, this is what we do, okay? So Francis was the herald of the great king, the greatest king, Jesus Christ, right? Now, it's been said that a herald, when we talk about the herald and the delivery of the gospel, our king, the herald could go out, right, hundreds of miles away and deliver the news of the king, what the king wanted to be delivered. But as heralds of the gospel, our king is with us. We don't leave him behind, okay? We don't leave him in Jerusalem. We don't leave him in our tabernacles. He stays with us. Isn't that marvelous? So we're heralds, but he's right here with us. He's right here in the room with us, okay? One thing with discipline, before I knew about the preventive system, and which works great, what I would say to my students, remember that we're in the presence of Jesus Christ. And it actually worked. You don't always have to yell at them. I did my share, okay, I have to say, but, okay, so you're good on the kerygma and the characters, who we are. So this method of Monsignor Kelly and what we've highly developed is a proclamation method of catechesis. So way before, Monsignor Kelly developed this way before, and it is the whole idea of the proclamation of the gospel, okay, which now is what the new directory, the 2020 directory, has asked us to do. So the first thing that the ecclesial method does, and it's called ecclesial, it doesn't come from the Vatican, but it's because it's kind of the best practice ever done in handing on the faith. He just took what's really good and effective. And when we teach, we're always teaching to conversion. That's very strong in the directory. But we teach about Jesus and bring people to come into relationship with him. It's all about conversion, okay? Conversion of heart. So conversion's not just Lent-based. Conversion is our whole life. You know the word metanoia, that total turn back to the Lord. That's what it's all about. So the preparation of this method is a period of calculated disengagement. I know that's a mouthful, but the calculated disengagement means that they disengage from whatever is got their attention, which is a million different things. We're all the same coming in here today. And then you calm them down prayerfully to get them to be open, docile to the proclamation that you want to teach them for that day. Does that make sense? So you're quieting them down. It's not an icebreaker. Icebreakers are great for, I hate them, okay? But I don't like, I don't do youth ministry. I'm not made for it. It's not in my DNA. I need my students sitting in a seat, okay? So, but this docility, so it's not the idea of let's do an icebreaker and we'll get them all together and do whatever. It's not that at all. It quiets them down. So if you think about your kids, whatever grade they're in, what they're coming from could be an abusive situation, could be total chaos. It could be that they're addicted to social media. It could be that God knows what they're involved in, right? And then they come in and you're saying, I want to teach you about Jesus, and they don't care. Often, right? To be real about it. So we quiet them down. Now there's lots of ways to do that. You could quietly read a passage of scripture to them. You could quietly tell them, it's a quiet process, okay? So quietly tell them a story of a saint. You could use a quieter piece of music, okay? Not something that's going to get them all up In praise and worship, that's for another piece, all right? So this calculated disengagement. It's not just an opening prayer, because oftentimes we start, I've done it myself. You walk in, you make the sign of the cross, pray Hail Mary, and you go to town, okay? Because I only have an hour and I have to get this done, right? It is worth the time you take to settle them down. When I was the diocesan director in the Diocese of Lincoln, and a parish asked me to come in because they couldn't control their kids. In there, they had PSR, CCD, whatever they call it, after school on Wednesdays. And so they said, can you come? Can you see what's going on? So I came. The school bus dropped them off at the religious ed program. And God bless them, the catechist had Rice Krispie Treats and red Kool-Aid waiting for them. You understand, okay? So there was the problem. So they sugared them all up, and red dye is so good for us as well. And then, they run off the bus, they eat sugar, and then you're expected to teach them, right? And they lost them. So I said, how about protein? Let's give them a little protein, and we'll settle them down, okay? So sometimes it's an easy fix, sometimes not as complicated. But to quiet them down. Make sense to you? Okay, any questions about that? There's tons of examples. You email me, I'll give you 1,000,000, okay? So, or Father Johann knows too. He's very good at this, actually. Not like he doesn't have anything to do, but he's very good at this methodology, this one. Good? Okay, now the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to proclaim the good news to your students. So what should be in your mind with this proclamation is, so it is the kerygma, but you think when you're getting your lessons prepared, what of anything that you're going to say that day, what do you want them to walk away with? One phrase, right? If all you, and sometimes I introduce it that way when I teach this. If all you remember today is Jesus Christ came to save sinners, and they went away with that, that'd be perfect, right? Because you're going to unpack that lesson. So there's lots of ways we can use a proclamation. One day I just went to them and I said, hell. That got their attention, okay? There's a problem. Hell, don't go there. Now that's, it's neither from Scripture nor from the Catechism, but it got their attention, okay? So it was high school kids, there you go. So in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it's loaded, right? And sometimes it's a little scary because it's so big, but it is so wonderful. It is just extraordinary. I love it. I cry sometimes when I read it. I use it to teach from all the time. In the Catechism, in every section, there's an in brief section. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Not enough, okay? So you're going to go home, you're promising, right? I'm going to read the Catechism. It's online. It's on the usccb.org. You don't even have to carry around a 20-pound book. It's got a really good, it's really well done on the bishop's website. But every section is this little in brief. Those could be your proclamations. So it's done for you. You don't have to worry, am I right? There's no massive list, official list anywhere. So that works, all right? You good with that one? Yeah? Questions? Good. Okay. It's just doing it, right? It's just doing it. Now, the next thing, you're going to unpack it. That's going to be the rest of your lesson, right? Now, we are extraordinarily tied to textbooks, which has its good side and it has its bad side, right? So, yes, we should have good textbooks, but you should also talk to them and not just read to them. Because, first of all, when I go to purgatory, somebody's going to be reading to me because I can't stand it. I used to work, I worked I worked everywhere. But anyway, so while I was teaching high school, I interpreted the PSR program for a little girl who was deaf from grade 2 to grade 8. I spent 6 years with her, so all her sacraments, it was just a blessing. And she had a teacher, so I'm sitting there loving catechetics, teaching religion, and some of these catechists, God bless them, weren't very good. Not very well trained. You're well trained. You're going to be fine, okay? So, but in one of her classes, the teacher, who meant well, so they came in every day, they sat down, he opened with a prayer, and then the kids took turns reading paragraph 1, paragraph 2. He included my little girl, so she signed, I voiced for her, which was terrific. When they were done, which was 5th grade, so that took about 20 minutes, they played hangman for the rest of the class. They had to use words from that chapter. Bless his heart, nobody said to him, and it wasn't my job. You know, I'm an interpreter, you can't say anything. So that's not our idea, right? That's called round robin reading. That was done to teach reading. That's not done to teach the faith. And when for lots of reasons, I read before I went to school, not because I'm smart, but I had an uncle that read to me all the time. And I went to school and we did that. See Tom run, see Betty run, see Flip run. That was my book, okay? And I always went ahead, and I got punished for it because that was in the old days, so you couldn't be different anyway. But I've hated round robin reading since that, and I have never used it as a teacher, ever. So don't do that, okay? It's not a good method. It's boring. And you know what you're doing, right? You love the Lord, you know what you're doing. Make sure you've covered the content, but you're unpacking the content. You're using stories. I love telling stories, as you can tell. You can tell from your own experience, as long as you filter them and whatever. Or the lives of the saints, filter in a life, say, well, this person, even if the textbook doesn't say it, then you can say, well, Saint so-and-so did this, with that teaching. You can do that. Good? Yeah? Now, also with that explanation, we don't have as much time as we wish that we would have when we're teaching in a parish program, but that's where you could also use activities, or they could color. Even big kids like to color from time to time, so you can use those activities in there. Now, the application, it looks like that would be homework, but it's not, okay? Homework comes up, and I'm all for homework, and they should take stuff home and study them. But the application means, how are their hearts touched? Are they going to be drawn closer to the Lord? Now, you're not just saying to them, step number 4, did you love Jesus today? That's not it, right? As you're teaching, you're ooh, thank God that was closed. Okay, so while you're teaching, you're bringing them into loving Jesus, okay? It doesn't matter what we're teaching. We're talking about loving Jesus and becoming better people. Yeah? Makes sense? Okay, buy the book, email me, and like I said, Father Johan's an expert at that. And then the last one is the closing prayer, but it should be a little bit more. Celebration doesn't mean you're having a party, it just means you celebrate what you've just learned. And it also should touch to the Eucharist. So always bring their attention. We're in the Eucharistic revival, which some of us know about, some of us don't, but the bishops are trying to get us all excited about the Eucharist. The statistics are dire. Do you know the statistics on Catholic belief? So 30% of Catholics believe in the true presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. 30%. And there's a new study, just came out last year, that of people who go to Mass every Sunday, only 40% believe in the true presence. They go to Mass every Sunday, but they don't believe that it's Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity. They think it's a symbol. We're in a mess, okay? We're in a mess. And then church attendance, we thought would pick up after COVID, but it didn't. And so the bishops decided to have a revival. So we're in the diocesan phase right now. In the summer, it'll go into the parish phase. And then in 2024, we're having a Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis, and you're all invited. And the website opened up 2 weeks ago, and you can already register. Good? Everybody's going to run right now. Don't do it now, okay? So this ending of the class just reminds them to go to Mass on Sunday, to love Jesus in the Eucharist, that Jesus is present, body, blood, soul, and divinity. We're as close to Him as we'll be until we meet Him face to face when we die. That's all the time I tell my students. Okay? So this is, again, it's like Father says, this is an appetizer. It's just to get get kind of excited, and there's resources out there. And again, I can help you, Father can help you, Father Johan can help you get the book. The book is very easy. It's an easy little book. Okay, we're good because we're going to move to the next exciting installment here. All right? Okay. Now, the next thing that Father asked me to do is this idea of sacred space. Okay, so almost every place except maybe a brothel or a bar on a bad night is, not that I know from personal experience, but is sacred, okay? But what happens, and some of you may do it, does anybody set up like a prayer table, or you enthrone scripture in your classrooms? Yeah, so I've been doing this since 1979. So I graduated from college in 1979, and I made final vows that same summer. And my parents came, and my dad was helping me set up my first classroom. And I made a little sacred space. And my dad never had been a teacher, right? He only had a 10th grade education, and he loved the Lord. And he said, I was teaching 7th grade, he said, those little brats are going to break all that stuff. And I said, no, I don't think so, Dad, I don't think so. And he said, I'm telling you, mark my words, they're going to break that. I don't think you should do this. And I said, well, just give me a chance, okay? It's my first year. And in all my years of using it, I've had one thing broken. So my father, God rest his soul, was wrong. So now I hope he's in heaven and he knows the truth. But if you teach it well, that this is a sacred space, or these objects are sacred, the kids will learn that, right? If you just put it out and you put it in their path, and they're going to be kids and they're going to do stuff, well, that's on you. That's your fault. Make sense? Yeah. The way I look at sacred space, and it took me a bit to develop this, I developed this idea called incarnational dynamism. It's, really comes from the Lord. But if you look at John 1, so John 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then it finishes by saying the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, right? So that's the prologue to John's Gospel. In 1 John 1, John's first letter in chapter 1, he says, that which we have heard, our hands have touched. So he's talking about the senses, okay? So sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. If you think about all those senses, they're all present at Mass, right? We see it, we hear it, we touch it, we taste it. And if we use incense or the church smells of incense, the smells are there, right? So that's that incarnational dynamism. All the sacraments are engaged to the senses. Okay? The sacraments are not just the priest saying words over us. We use water, and we use oil, and we use bread. See, we use all those things in the sacraments. There's always touching in the sacraments. We use all those things. If you think about Jesus' parables, it's all about stuff. So the sea, seeds, trees, sheep. You follow me? You're all good with that? All right. Now, St. Augustine, one of my favorites, when he converted to Catholicism, which took him forever, but he finally did. He's one of the most famous converts in the church other than Scott Hahn. His office is next door to mine. I have been introduced at places with my credential is my office is next door to Scott Hahn's. But actually his office is next door to mine. So, anyway, St. Augustine, when he was talking about his conversion, says, "You shone, you broke through my blindness. You shouted, you broke through my deafness. You were within me, but I was without you. I breathed and I swallowed you and I inhaled your goodness." It's not the exact quote, but it's those senses, okay? So I'm trying to stress to you the senses, the senses, the senses, the senses. Got it? Okay. The other thing that we do, if you've taken any education classes, is we talk about learning modalities, all right? So learning modalities are auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. So auditory, what we hear, visual is what we see, and kinesthetic is how we move. We're pretty good at the visual and the auditory. We're not very good at the kinesthetic. So if you have kids in your class, this goes back to what we were talking about this morning. If you have kids in your class who can't sit still, like really can't sit still, and we make them sit still, there's no win on the end of that. And oftentimes, because those kids are distracted themselves, they're not learning, and then they become a distraction to others. So we don't help them. So how bold are you to allow one of those little kids who can't sit still, or a big kid, and let them walk around in the back of the classroom? That takes courage. But trying to make them sit still, saying sit still, sit still, sit still, it doesn't work because they can't. I mean, they don't want to be like that, okay? Some of you can't sit still and you have to sit through everything that we do today, but you're free to get up and walk around if you want, because you're a grown-up. Who's going to say anything to you? But we have those kids and we have them prisoners, okay? And so we have to be bold. I mean, you have to set the parameters. No hanging from the lights, no jumping out the window. I've seen it all. I had a student who actually, while I was teaching, sorry, that's a surprise for later, walked across all the desks, on the top of every desk, with students sitting in there and I'm teaching. His name was Kevin, which every Kevin that I've taught is like that moment from Home Alone. That was him, okay? Now, that wasn't appropriate. So we did have a little come to Jesus talk about that. But we have to be open to that. So the learning modality. So when I started teaching, we used the reel-to-reel projectors, which I could never thread. And so, but my busiest boy, because boys have ADD more than girls, my busiest boy would be the one that knew how to do that. And he was my guide, okay? He was my guide, run to the office guy. See, we can find ways. But to see things and to hear things, but also to touch things. So what I want to give you some examples. So I'm writing a book on sacred space. And I have over 150 sacred spaces that I photographed for this process. So I'm not showing them all to you today. But I wanted, because seeing is better than anything. If I'm talking about using the senses and I just tell you about sacred space and don't show you any, that'd be bad on my part. So you don't have to be crazy like I am, okay? So I am over the top on sacred space, and I've been developing these for millions of years. You don't have to have a lot of space, all right? So these are narrow ones that you could bring into your classroom, right? Without having to have, not in your own classroom. Most of you, you're dragging stuff from home. So this is just a little setup. You don't have to use the background if you didn't have to. But both these things, see, this is an Easter one, obviously. Both these things are from Hobby Lobby, who sells religious stuff. And then, and a candle. But you could be arrested if you burn it or something. I got caught at the university by maintenance guys, so I use electric candles now, but this is in my house. But now we have battery controlled candles. So see, that's not that complicated. And it has a real lily in there. Why would I use a real one and not a fake one? The smell. Yeah, it's the smell. It's glorious. So that they should be able to smell that. All right? So see? You good? You like it? It's okay. So this is more complicated. This took more work to do. So this is one that I do on women. So the thing on the top, she has fire in her soul and grace in her heart. So that was from Walmart. Walmart's my favorite sacred space, and the dollar store, okay? So, dollar store and a can of spray paint, you can do all kinds of stuff. So just this little, these are at the time, because I don't have Sister Miriam Therese, well, should be in here, but this was done. So they're women saints in the church. They're all religious, because that's what I was teaching about for this lesson. So you could put other women in there, other saintly women, if you wanted to. Blessed Mother's in there, of course. So she starts at Our Lady of, sorry about that. So Our Lady of Guadalupe is up in the corner. In this frame, I'm trying to get the cursor to work here. In this frame is a wonderful quote from John Paul on women and the Blessed Mother. Now, it's hard to see from a distance, but that's where you would let the students come up. You would read it to them. So they see it, you explain it, and then they can touch it. And then those candles I just decorated, and they're from the dollar store. So, see, you can do it. Doesn't cost a whole lot of money, because I don't have any. So I really rely on benefactors and trying to make it as simple as I possibly can. But see, this is in a small space. That's only about that big. So you don't have to drag this great big thing, have this great big elaborate. It's easy. What do you think this was for? Well, could be baptism. Yeah, no. It's Holy Thursday. Oh, it's all there. See? So we have the priesthood, the Eucharist, the washing of the feet. It's all Holy Thursday. Good? And it does reflect the things that the priest is using at the Holy Thursday Mass with the washing of the feet and the Eucharist. I just dropped my chalice there, that ceramic chalice. I dropped it on the floor, and it smashed into smithereens, so I don't have it anymore. Oh well. Okay, and then the stole is the symbol of the priesthood, and that's also, we commemorate that on Holy Thursday. Nobody? Yeah, it's the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord. So this is a Fontanini thing. You know Fontanini nativity sets? They also have the Baptism of the Lord. They also have Easter stuff. So there's the Baptism of the Lord, and then there's a big shell, and it's still in Christmas season, so to speak. So it has the Christmas things there, but it's the Baptism of the Lord. You're thrilled? Somebody bought this for me, but I'm always on the hunt for the St. Nicholas who's a bishop, because he was a bishop. So somebody got this for me, but it's for the Feast of St. Nicholas. And I don't have a problem with Santa Claus. I believed in him until I was in 3rd grade. I fought, okay? And I was the oldest, so I had no older siblings to ruin it for me. But he was a bishop, and we should teach him that way as well, okay? What do you think this one is for? Yeah, it's ordination, okay? So the bishop is there. I made that mitre. It's made out of foam board. You can buy it at the dollar store or whatever. Stands up straight. Nobody looks at it too carefully. All right. It's a real stole because I have another one. He's kind of my son. He's a priest, and he bought me the stole. And then the rite of ordination is there in the words. And that candle, somebody gave that to me, smells like the chrism oil. You know how new baptized babies smell so good? But the chrism is used at ordination, and so then the kids can smell it as well because they don't always are in touch with chrism. Good? Okay. Moving right along. What's unique about this? It's cultural. So I put this at the university. I love her. She's my favorite angel, okay? Got her at a junk store. $2.98. Okay, it looks like it's a very expensive, exotic piece. No, came from a junk store. So I put it out and I say to my students, just comment on it, right? And they say, God bless them, angels aren't black. What's the problem with that? Angels aren't white either. Okay, angels don't have bodies. So they're not as smart as they think they are, all right? So we have a huge problem with racism in this country, and if we worked a little harder at just making things ordinary, we would be in a lot better shape. So I'm huge on all of that. And I have like hundreds of these, and so I have, and again, not every Hispanic culture is all the same. It's not all Mexican, right? So I try to mix that all up, and then European cultures. And another thing that I do with that is nativity sets from other countries with different cultures reflected. That's just the oil of the sick. So the sacraments are gifts. I found these little gift boxes at the dollar store. The bottle comes from the dollar store, and the oil is Crisco oil. Because we don't use the real stuff, okay, in our sacred space. But see how simple that is and can be, and things that they don't know about. This one is for consecrated life. Anybody figure that one out? So poverty, chastity, and obedience, so the three vows. And religious life is not a sacrament by itself, it's rooted in baptism. So if you look at it's a glass bowl from the dollar store, okay? And the thing underneath it has 8 sides. Anybody know why? Baptismal fonts for a long time all had 8 sides, okay? So that was a stop sign I bought at Walmart and spray painted silver. I'm telling ya, it's not as hard as it looks, okay? So, I don't know where I got that from, but, the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit, the flames. Yeah. Now here's Sister Miriam Therese Demjanovich. I didn't do this for today. I did this anyway because I have a huge devotion to her. But she talks about the door and the faith as the door, and I have it all written down. It's over there. But can you read that where she says your soul is the secret chamber, your bodily senses the window, your qualities of character, good and bad, is the furniture and the hangings. Your will is the door. Faith is the key. If a door and a key, then there has to be a keyhole, and the desire and disposition to pray is the keyhole. So she is here. We're going to go have Mass where her body is reserved. So I made one because I love her. So that door theme, do you see that? Found those little door keyholes. And again, I didn't do this for here. I did it because I like her. And she's an American saint. We have to pay more attention to the American saints. I'm nuts, okay? So this Advent, I was on a roll, and I kept talking to my students about the Grinch. Everybody talks about the Grinch, and you're a mean one, Mr. Grinch, and stink, stink, stunk. But nobody talks about conversion. That's the Grinch converted. So I made this sacred space, but actually my students found this card, this Christmas card. So it's his converted. It's not you're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. So I wouldn't say it's number one on the hit parade of sacred spaces, but it gets its message across, right? And it's very popular in the culture. Where's my Salesians? There's my Salesian sacred space. So I'm one of very few people that have that statue of Don Bosco and his mother. So that was from the men. Okay, so I didn't tell you, I'm close to Father Lou Molinelli. He's one of my best friends. And I've done a lot of work with Father Lou Molinelli. He's a Salesian from New Jersey. So the Salesians gave me that statue, so reason, religion, and kindness, and then the little fake Beretta from a Halloween costume. So you can't go find that statue, I'm sorry, but you can get a picture of Don Bosco. It's Elizabeth Ann Seton, okay, the real founder of the Sisters here. I made this one, okay, this took forever. But I made that little schoolroom, and it's a little elaborate and it's over the top, but it's me. One of my former students that I'm very close to, she made the bonnet for me, so is Mother Seton's bonnet. Okay, so do you have any questions about that? We're not over, but I'm just over on that one, okay? Sorry, you can still hear me. I know it's being recorded, but I just need a little sit-a-spell. Any questions about, can you see yourself in your wildest dreams setting up sacred spaces like that? You don't have to be crafty. You know, really, if you had a crucifix and a Bible, you're doing good. But it does better if you have something that touches the doctrine so that they could see it. Like if you're talking with anointing, in any of the sacraments, right? If you have oil, you don't have to have the holy oils, but you can't have the holy oils. Unless Father brings them over, to talk to your class about, that's also a possibility. If you're talking about water, you should have water. If you're talking about a mustard seed, right? If your faith is as great as a mustard seed, get a mustard seed. Show them how tiny the mustard seed is. Because really, they're not getting it, right? It's you think you're absolutely clear and you probably are doing a great job, but they need to see and touch and taste. That's why we have the sacraments. That's why we do all that. Does that make sense to you? Yeah, and it doesn't have to be expensive. Again, the dollar store, Walmart, some craft stores. For Christmas, a student gave me, I got a couple of gift cards, bless their hearts. My college students are cash poor, but I got some gift cards. So benefactors, my aunts are all passed now, but they were my benefactors when I was young and setting out. They were very generous to me. My parents were. Find somebody who wants to help you and becomes a benefactor. They don't want to be a teacher, but they want to help. All right? So you're going to run right out and go to the dollar store and spray paint away. All right. So the last thing then that Father wanted me to talk about is the Antiqua Ministerium, all right, which is the ministry of catechist. And it's not as well understood as I wish it was, but anyway, we're going to give it our best shot. So have you heard of it? No. So the ministry, I mean, that's the Latin for it, but it's the ministry of catechists. So about, time just falls together, but it was last year, Pope Francis issued a motu proprio, which means it's something that's done under his authority. And he started this ministry of catechist. So when he starts the document, he says that the ministry of catechist in the church is an ancient one. So again, I don't read the slides, they're too long, but you'll get them. And you can read this, all right? If you just type in Antiqua Ministerium in Google, it's going to come up for you. Not right now, but, later. So catechists have been around since the early church, right? The apostles were the first catechists, and then we say it's spread and the teaching of the faith. So it's a special calling, always has been in the church. We're good with that? So the Holy Father then, he reflects on this history of evangelization. So it's only been in the past 45 years or so that we've started to really use the word evangelization in the church. It was kind of a Protestant word for a long time. We talked about the evangelists, the gospel writers, but as far as a lot of us were concerned, evangelists were guys on TV with bad hair looking for money, right? So, but we use the word now because evangelization means to bring people into relationship with Jesus Christ. So that's what we're doing. So it's always an evangelizing catechesis. That's what we're doing. So that's what he's talking about here today. And then he talks about specifically, he talks about priests and religious, but then he talks specifically about lay people. And that how many lay people, which the majority of you are here, have been involved in catechesis in the history of the church, especially in the United States. So you're good on all that? You're all fine? Okay. So he talks about this lay apostolate. So the lay person in the church is not somebody who is not a priest or a sister. It's not a leftover vocation, right? It's a real vocation. And but it's in the secular world, right? So you all live and work in the world more than I do, but you bring the gospel to the world. That's the job of the lay people, okay? You're in places that religious can't go. So here's the big thing. So he says, with all his authority, therefore, after having taken all things into consideration, and by apostolic authority, I established the lay ministry of catechist. And then he says there's going to be a rite, so the rite has been developed. And then he invites Episcopal conferences to render effective ministry of the catechist. So then it's up to the bishops, all right? Now, that's my last slide on that. But what we're going to do, I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to sit down for a bit. You all right? It's all good? You can hear me. As long as you can hear me, I know you can't see me. I'm still here. So we're going to just unpack this a little bit, okay? Because, you know, the secular press gets a hold of it, or even some Catholic press gets a hold of it, and nobody really understands it very well. So, but we do, okay? We have full understanding. Now, our bishops, because it says the Holy Father wants every Episcopal conference to work on this. So we have the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Every country has its own conference of bishops. Our bishops work in Washington, D.C. And just for full transparency, I work for the bishops, okay? So I work, I'm a consultant for the Committee on Evangelization and Catechesis. I'm not saying that so you're impressed. I'm just saying that, but I'm not make sure I'm not speaking for the bishops right now. That's not my job. I don't speak for the bishops. They speak for themselves. But we've been working on this. I've had the privilege of working on what's going to come from the bishops, hopefully by the end of the year. and what this means, okay, and what it doesn't mean. So that's what I'm going to try to clarify, and that's what Father Johann wanted me to do with you. So this ministry of lay catechist is very, very specific. And I know you're going to, please don't be upset, okay? Just don't be upset. Just be calm. Everybody's good? It's not for volunteer catechists. Okay? And it's also not for priests or deacons or religious. So I've been working on this for 2 years, and it's not for me. Have you seen the movie, The Song of Bernadette? You know, she's dying, and the sisters are saying, why don't you drink of the water from the spring? And she says, the spring is not for me, right? And I think the right is not for me. So it is meant for people who, they use the word stability quite a bit. So it's not that you're not stable. But it's more for, and it doesn't mean you're left out or unappreciated, or there's none of that there, okay? There's none of that there. The work that you do for the church, especially volunteer catechists, we could not run without you. You're the backbone of catechesis in the United States, all right? But this is a separate, specific honor that's given, ministry that's given. So the people who will be receiving this, especially as we're trying to see how it's done, will be people that are either in diocesan offices or parish, like DREs in a parish, and not the volunteers. So it's a hard thing for me to stay in front of a room of volunteer catechists, but I'm just explaining the right to you because, again, it's been misunderstood, and so it's not going to just be given to anybody who teaches CCD on Saturday afternoon or whenever you do it, okay? Without denigrating you at all. There is nothing there. Nothing in the document, nothing in all of that, okay, that does that. So everybody's good? You don't have your knickers in a twist? So you're not going to be beating down the door of the USCCB saying it's not fair, it's not fair. You didn't even know it existed, so there you go. Now look, this is the process. So last year, the Holy Father released this that I quoted from, this motu proprio. He actually had people, he did it pretty soon in the Diocese of Rome, but you can imagine the Diocese of Rome. So he had those people, there is a separate rite, so there's prayers and readings and all of that that will be done. And then he left it up to the bishops' conferences in each country to see what the basics are there. It's a stable ministry, all of those things. So those things have to stay. But the thing with this ministry of catechist as well is those people who receive the ministry, the official ministry of catechist, have to be prepared. Okay, there has to be formation for them as well. Okay, now most people who have those positions have been formed, but there has to be an ongoing formation. So what our bishops have done, so there, the bishops' conference is a big thing in DC, and then it's divided up into committees. So the Committee on Evangelization and Catechesis is in charge of this implementation. So that's what, because I work for them, they've been working on. And also in this process of working on this, there were other committees that were consulted. So the committees that helped us, or helped the bishops with that, is the Committee on the Liturgy, because it's a rite. The Committee on, I'll lose it, it's all done. It was right here, right now. So it's on the lay ecclesial ministry, that committee, liturgy committee, education committee, evangelization and catechesis, and doctrine, okay, the Committee on Doctrine, so that we understand everything that has to be in that. So there was a document written for the promulgation of this in the United States. So the document, the first draft of the document has been finished. It'll go to those 5 other committees that I talked about, and just for them to vote on it. And then when that's all, and if there's changes that need to be made or any of that, and then it'll go to the full Bishops' Committee in November. Bishops meet all together in June and November. So at the November meeting, this document will be voted on. We'll see how that goes. Who knows? All up to the Holy Spirit. But, and then it'll start to be implemented. All right? Is that more information than you ever wanted in your whole life, or not enough, or can I answer your questions? Nothing? Yes?
How do we lay people fit in with all of this?
It is a lay ministry. It's just for lay people. You mean volunteer catechists? It doesn't really apply to volunteer catechists. Father just wanted me to explain. Now, in the future it may, but as it's written now from the Vatican, it doesn't include that. But you need to understand it because it is a catechetical ministry.
And who did you say it includes again? I mean, who?
It will be kind of like diocesan catechetical leaders and then parish, like big parish permanent staff, you know? So that's what it's intended for. It's really stability and leadership. So again, are you starting to get upset because it's not you? But your role, I can't say it enough. I have spent almost my entire religious life training volunteer catechists. And I know who you are, and I know how important you are. And the church knows that. And some bishop asked the question, well, what do we do for a volunteer catechist? I said, as much as you can. You thank them, you give them presents, right? You acknowledge them. You could pay them. There's that. I think there should be some payment for volunteer catechists because you give so much of yourself. But that's on the parish level, right? But the diocesan bishop should encourage that. Part of it is workshops like this, like further training, and then you come together. Anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, could I just ask a general question? I teach 8th grade, and we're on the second session. And I'm just wondering for some suggestions, helping the students understand that they actually body Christ in the Eucharist.
So for those of you that couldn't hear, and it's being recorded downstairs and stuff, so he asked about teaching the children about the Eucharist, like what it really is. And you just have to keep doing it. So I always have a story, so I'm sorry, but when I taught high school, I was the head of the religion department, and we used to have these all-school masses in the gym, which is just the best day of ever, never. So you got to work on the kids and work on the kids and work on the kids. And so every time before Mass started, and we had a great principal who would talk to them about decorum and, you know, like it's not a gym now, it's a church. And that already is teaching them. But I would go out before every Mass, and I did it every day, every time we had a Mass. And I said, in a few minutes, and I stood right by the altar, Jesus will be present on this altar, body, blood, soul, and divinity. And you'll receive him, and it will be the closest you are to him until you die and you meet him face to face. So I did it before every Mass. Now I got sick of it. Okay, you just get tired of it, and you look up, and the kids are kids, and they're going whatever they're doing, trying to get in as much trouble as they possibly can when they think nobody's looking, right? So, but I thought I still have to do it, you know, and in the school where I taught, the religion teachers were the Eucharistic ministers, so you were also giving Holy Communion to your own students, knowing they shouldn't be receiving communion, but there isn't that much you can do about it, right? So you talk to them and all of that. So I just kept doing it and doing it. Now here's where there can be a payoff, and you may never know from an 8th grader, okay? Or high school student. So I finished at the university. I finished teaching high school, did another ministry, and then I went to Franciscan. When I got to Franciscan University, 5 of my high school kids were in school, and they also were cat majors. Okay, so they had me again. So bless their hearts. All right, so wonder they didn't transfer out to another school, but anyway, they didn't. So one of them came in and he said, "Sister, remember when you used to go out there before Mass started and you used to say to us in a few minutes, Jesus and body, blood, soul, and divinity?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Yeah, I didn't believe you." And I said, "I'm not surprised." Okay, so he said, "Yeah, as a freshman. I had him as a freshman. I didn't believe you." And I said, "Yeah, I'm not surprised." And he said, "Sophomore year, you did the same thing. You got out there before every Mass and you said the same thing. And I still didn't believe you." And I said, "Okay." And then he said, "I was a junior and you went out there one day and you said it and I knew it was true and I believed you." And he's a priest, okay? Now, I didn't cause his priesthood. I was God, okay? But that is always an experience in my life where I was sick of it, like talking and seeing that they weren't paying attention. And you take it personally, right? If you love Jesus and you love the Eucharist, you take it very personally. And so, but you do the best that you can. So you have to keep repeating. And where the word is, so I have this little closest I'll ever have is having a grandson. He has autism. But he's brilliant, and he was going to receive the Eucharist in a small, quiet, in his parish is very open to that because he couldn't do the big, he says, real problem with the sensory overload. So his mom was really nervous because she prepared him, but she was my student. And his father is a scripture scholar, so I mean, he knew his stuff. But his mom said, "Please just come and talk to him, I'd feel better." So I kept it really relaxed. And then I said, "William, how do we know that it's really Jesus, that the Eucharist is really Jesus?" And he looked at me and he said, "It's because he said so." There it is. So we have the institution of the Eucharist, Matthew, Mark, and Luke's Gospel. We have John 6. In John's Gospel, Jesus says, "I am the bread of life. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has life in me." Either Jesus lied or he's telling the truth. That's where you have to help your students. So Jesus said so. And that's what we see at every Mass. Okay, is that helpful to you? It's perseverance and using Jesus' own words.
I was kind of just reading on something. Thomas Aquinas was talking about versatility and essence.
Yeah, no. That's not what we're doing. And that's all works, okay? It works. Thomas is great. He was big on the Eucharist. But go to Jesus. The other thing I just did, I do some workshops for another thing, and the person who leads these workshops, he was my student at the university, but we just did to Catholic school teachers on the Eucharist. And an activity that he did, he took modern Eucharistic miracles, like the last 10 minutes, like not the way back ones like Lanciano and all those, because that seems like ancient history. And they've done the DNA, and they find out there's no source for the DNA in these 3 Eucharistic miracles where it's real flesh, and they all have AB blood type. So it's the same blood type. So, and I don't remember those apparitions for you, but I would find those because I wouldn't start with that, but it does support. I'd use Jesus' own words, but I'd support those. Stay away from the old ones. That's not relevant to the kids. Nothing's relevant to the kids, okay? Some of my kids are not so sure who George Washington is. But anyway, but that's a way to do it as well. Do the modern stuff where it's science that's proving that it's real. There's statistics out there that say children start to lose their faith as young as 6 because they start to get science. And science, even in a Catholic school, sometimes is not taught with faith, not taught that God created the world and everything in it. So if you use science, like DNA and blood typing and all of that, to prove these are not just whatever, right? Then you're kind of getting science on your side as well. Okay? So you good on anything else I can do for you while I'm here? Solved all your questions. You're going to run right out, make sacred spaces. All right then. Thank you.
I wanted to mention, is Father Yohan back there? One of Father Yohan's friends from, was it St. Vincent's? The folks who did, I just wanted to mention, I don't remember their names, but friends of Father Yohan made this triptych here with the image of the Holy Trinity just to create some sacred space here. So, are they here? No. Oh, okay. Well, thank them for us. So those of you who are downstairs are going to move into session 4, and your lunch will be at 1 o'clock. Those of us who are here and have just heard the presentation in person, we are going to go to lunch at 12 o'clock. And lunch is going to be served in the cafeteria. You need your food voucher with the Diocese of Patterson misspelled. That's okay. And so you need to bring this with you, and then it's buffet. You can get what you would like, and you can eat in the cafeteria, or you can bring your food out here if you would like. So you will stay here through lunch, 12 to 1, and then the session 5